What's up, Joe Joe in the Morning family? Happy Friday. Today, we're going to talk about something. And if you're going through this, please send me a prayer request, jojoedawson.net. There's a place for prayer requests. Send it to me. I want to pray for you, okay? Understand this. I'm going to teach you how to deal with loneliness, okay? Now, there's times in life when you may feel lonely. You may feel alone. But I'm telling you, you can use that time for your advantage. You can use that time to build according to the Spirit of the Lord. Now, there's different types of loneliness. You know, there's times when someone has been married for, 50 amazing years, and their spouse may pass away and they've never been alone because they were living with their parents, and then they got married for 50 years. That's a different type of loneliness, and I do want to pray for people that may be dealing with that. You have to understand that every season of your life, how are you going to be able to move forward with God? How are you going to be able to move forward in advance? I remember a season that I was in loneliness. I got radical for God. I was young. I was about 20 years old, and I just got radical for God. And so my friends, they weren't radical for God or even really serving the Lord. And so I was so radical, I just started pursuing God, and I didn't want to hang out. A lot of my friends, we used to play a lot of ball. I'm talking basketball, we talk about volleyball, just would always go fishing, duck hunting and stuff. And that stuff's good and fun. But man, I just got so radical for God. And all of a sudden I was praying, 4 to 6 hours a day. And then one day I was like, I don't have a whole lot of interaction with people outside of my job, because I'm just spending all this time with God. And I drew so close to God. And sometimes I'd be like, man, I'm going to go hang out with my friends. I'm going to go eat somewhere, do something like that. And you would get kind of lonely, but I got so close to God, I didn't care when I was alone. In fact, I build when I'm alone. And so you have to understand that. I remember this one guy, when I was a youth pastor, he was always down. He was always down for whatever. And it didn't matter what you were going to go do. He was just down for whatever. He never wanted to be alone, okay, because he hated loneliness. I remember I saw that guy when he was about 40, didn't have a stable job, was just kind of being tossed to and fro, and he was just down with whatever. So I was talking to him, and he said, remember when I was in youth group, I was just, anytime somebody would call, hey, you want to go eat? Sure. You want to play basketball? Sure. You want to go do this? Yeah. You want to play golf? Yeah. You want to go this trip? Sure. And he said, I'm still like that got me a little part-time job, never been married. And he said, I'm always hanging out with people because I don't ever want to be alone. He was never able to really find out who he was in God. Because when you're alone with God, that's where your quiet time is. Mark 1:35, Jesus got up early in the morning and went to a solitary place, an alone place where he prayed. Now that's different from just an hour or two of being alone versus, isolation type of loneliness. But you can use seasons of isolation and loneliness to be able to move forward. But a lot of people, they get into loneliness and they let that sink in, that they're always alone and they're wanting to be around people. So there's 2 or 3 different ways to look at it. This is a short video, so I can't dive into all of it. But understand that God is always with you. God will always strengthen you, and God will always bring the right people around you. I remember one time this young man said one of the things that destroyed his life was feeling lonely. He said, because there was a time in my life when God was going to do something great, and he kind of pulled me away, isolated me for a season, but I wouldn't be isolated. And so I missed that season of what God wanted to do. He said, another time God offered me like an isolation season. Isolation is not loneliness, okay? And he said, I missed these brief moments. And so I hope this is making sense to a lot of people, okay? Some people just get caught up with being alone, and they don't like that. Well, you know what the Bible says? If you want a friend, first show yourself, be friendly. You need people to hang out with. You need people to go to lunch with. I got a lunch appointment today with a good friend of mine. You have different appointments for different things, but there are seasons of our life when you're alone. A lot of people, that's what they struggle with in college. When they go off to college, they don't want to just sit in their dorm room and study, or, and so they just want to be around everybody. Or people, when if you're single, they just want to hang out with folks all the time. They join all types of. I've seen people in churches volunteer for everything because they don't want to be alone. But people that can never really be alone, they really never build anything, because you build in silence, you build alone. So sometimes when God gives you a season that you need to be alone, build in that season, okay? Now that's different from somebody who's lonely, okay? Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. Don't be dismayed, for I am your God, and I will strengthen you, and I will help you. If you're dealing with loneliness, ask God to bring you a friend. The Bible says you want a friend, show yourself to be friendly. You need interaction, but also don't neglect the place of being alone, okay? That's what I'm trying to point out. Loneliness and being alone are two different things, okay? And so don't get so caught up that I'm alone all the time that you don't build, because that's where strength comes from, and when you're building. Now here's another form of kind of loneliness. You know, you can do a whole book on this. Psalms 27:10, for my father and my mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will always take me in. You know, I know so many people who have a mother or a father wound and it destroyed their life because loneliness set in, bitterness set in. And then I know a lot of people who've had, you know, seasons where their mother and father forsaken them, and they made God their ultimate father. You know, they just really dove into the place of prayer. And I'll tell you, there was a time when I was 20 to 21 and hadn't met Autumn yet, hadn't got married. I was going to a church. I was 20, 21 years old at the time. The oldest youth was 13, couldn't really hang out with them. And the youngest young adult was about 30, so I didn't have a whole lot in common with them. And so they were married, and so I just spent time with the Lord every day. And I remember some people said, are you lonely? And I said, Lord, no, I got Jesus. Like, I got Jesus. Me and Jesus, we have prayer meetings 4 to 6 hours a day. And so I just love that season of my life. Deuteronomy 31:6, be strong and courageous, and don't fear or don't have dread, for the Lord is with you wherever you go. He will never leave you, and he will never forsake you. I remember one time I was starting to feel lonely, and I just said, God, I just need to feel your presence right now. And I remember in that sanctuary while I was sitting on that pew, and the presence of God came in and wrapped around me like a winter blanket, wrapped around me like a coat. And I said, how in the world could I ever be lonely when I got the presence of God? The next week, okay, did you hear that? I felt comfort in the Spirit. The next week, these two guys in our church, they were a little older than me. They came up to me. One was 35 and one was 40. They were single guys. And they said, hey man, we heard you've been coming up here praying. I said, yeah. They said, you know, we're both single and we love the Lord. I mean, these guys love the Lord. Can we come to pray with you at night? And I said, well, I get off work at 6. I get here about 6:30 every night, and I pray at about 10:30. And sometimes in the morning, sometimes I'll stay till midnight and pray. And they said, cool. So we started praying. About a year later, I got put on staff at the church. And those same guys, we would meet up for lunch about 3-4 days a week. So I got these friends, but I didn't get the friends until I overcame loneliness and I found comfort in having Jesus with me. As soon as I was comfortable being alone with Jesus, that's when God brought friends into my life. And then, you know, started hanging out with those guys. A few months later, God brought a guy in that's 1 year younger than me. Had a friend about my age. Man, we started hanging out. We started going to the Brownsville revival together. The next thing you know, I had all these friends around me. But I've never felt lonely since then, because I found comfort in being alone with Jesus, okay? So hopefully this week really helped you guys. And, you know, let me say one thing about loneliness. Loneliness can actually bring serious health concerns to people. It can include risk of heart disease, depression, and even people have said premature death has happened in people's life because of loneliness. That's why you got to find your comfort in the Lord. You're never alone when you have Him, okay? So I love you guys, and I hope that this blessed you today, and I want to speak life and blessing over you. And if you deal with loneliness, just send me an email. Just write loneliness. If you want to go in a little bit of description, you can. Please don't write me a book, because I get a lot of emails. But I really felt this week that God wanted me to speak to people about these emotional issues that are destroying so many people, okay? I love you guys. Have a super blessed weekend.